Right. Hi, guys. So today I'm here to talk about Power BI on Databricks best practices. My name is Liping. You can find me on my YouTube channel. I do a lot of Power BI content, Databricks content. I basically became a full-time content creator as of 2 weeks ago. So what makes me qualified to talk about Power BI on top of Databricks? I was with Microsoft for nearly 3 years, specialized in Power BI and Synapse. Then I moved on to Databricks for the last 2.5 years. Again, specialized with DB SQL, data engineering, and integration with Power BI. About 2 weeks ago, I left Databricks to move to Singapore and do full-time content creation. And I will be working with a company called Tabular Editor. If you come from Power BI world, you probably are familiar with Tabular Editors. I'll be making a lot more content on the pro dev features of Tabular Editor going forward. By training, I'm a solution architect, but I also do a lot of public speaking, and I do a lot of content creation in terms of YouTube videos as well as blogs. So yeah, if you're interested in other content that I've made, check out my YouTube channel. So today we're talking about Power BI on top of Databricks. Typically, people care about three things when it comes to the integration between the two. They care about the performance. You want the queries to run really, really fast, the refresh to run fast, as well as the direct query to perform well. And you want security to set up properly. So people who should have access to the data do have access to the data, but then people who shouldn't are blocked out accordingly. And then you want the integration between the two technologies to work seamlessly. And we will structure this content in these three parts, and I'll take questions between. Yeah, so let's get started. When you have a Power BI instance running on top of Databricks, typically people are frustrated. When people are frustrated with performance, they don't know who to talk to. They don't know whether they should raise the support ticket with Microsoft, talk to a CSA from Microsoft, or they should come talk to Databricks and see if Databricks can do anything about the performance. The truth is you need both, right? The performance is influenced by the configuration on both sides. So just because you're super familiar with Power BI, you tune the performance in Power BI 100%. If you left everything on the table from Databricks side, your performance for Power BI on top of Databricks won't be running very nicely. So you want to tune Power BI and you want to tune Databricks. And Databricks is two parts. So Databricks has got the storage layer, which typically is Delta Lake. And you want to do everything you can to make sure the file layout and everything is working as optimal as possible in Delta Lake. And you want to also set up Databricks SQL, which is the compute cluster, in accordance to the best practice guidelines. So three elements really: Power BI, the Delta Lake, as well as Databricks SQL compute need to all work together hand in hand to make the performance of Power BI on Databricks work really well. So I'm assuming, because this is a Power BI and Fabric user group, everybody's familiar with Power BI, how to performance tune Power BI. So I'll brush through this. If you have any questions, we can answer them after the performance section. But essentially, you want to think about import versus direct query. Obviously, import gives you all the performance benefits. But in the case where your data is streaming in and you need to reflect that real-time data in Power BI on real-time basis, then you need to use direct query. Another scenario you will want to use direct query is your model size is too big for whatever premium capacity or pro capacity you are on. So P1 capacity limit is 25 gigabytes for model size. If your semantic model is too big to fit in that 25 gigabyte, then you need to move to DirectQuery. The third scenario, and sometimes we see customers do use that, is they don't want to have a separate access control in Databricks Unity Catalog and in Power BI. They want to have Unity Catalog to control access for every single user, including all the Power BI users. In that sense, they will need to use DirectQuery because imports will basically use a single service account, port all the data over, cache all that, and then let Power BI do access control instead. So these three scenarios, access control using Unity Catalog, model being too big, or real-time data, you would want to consider DirectQuery. Everything else, use imports is fine. Use star schema. Everybody's familiar. Power BI loves star schema. And because Databricks doesn't have something like Direct Lake Fabric, so you want to utilize something like composite model, aggregations, hybrid tables to take advantage of both imports and direct query, and use them accordingly to try to boost your semantic model's performance. Toggle on referential integrity when you manage the relationship in Power BI semantic modeling view. This is because in referential integrity will generate inner join SQL queries, and Databricks runs much faster on inner join queries rather than the left joins. And then because Power BI itself is a visualization tool, it's not necessarily built for very heavy lifting kind of transformation logic. So if you can, try to build views or build materialized views or do transformation logic as much as you can in Databricks and feed that into Power BI, or use query folding, make sure that Power BI is not importing the entire table and then do the transformation within Power BI. You want Power BI to do as much query folding as possible and push the heavy lifting down to Databricks, because Databricks can scale up and out as needed, and then you can kind of leverage the compute power of Databricks better. Use efficient DEX calculations. We all know that bad DEX calculations can slow down the performance of Power BI. And these are about concurrency. So some of these you can set in the settings of Power BI desktop options. And some of these you need to write Timso and stuff. But the idea is you want to increase the parallelism in line with your Databricks SQL scale out clusters. So if you have one cluster that can scale out one SQL warehouse that can scale out to 10 clusters, and you want the concurrency setting to reflect that, so you can take advantage of the maximum parallelism possible when you're refreshing a data set or doing direct query. Reduce the number of visuals on a page. That's just for direct query, and this is all the same. When you're doing direct query, Power BI will generate a lot of metadata queries, as well as just very chatty in general. So the more visualizations you have, the more slicers you have, Power BI will generate a lot more SQL queries down to Databricks. And again, if you have the SQL warehouse done so that it scale out to certain amount. You don't want unnecessary queries to take up all the slots for the parallelism. So what you want to do is to do query reduction settings, as well as to put a button to apply all or clear all slicers. So it's just reduce the amount of SQL queries, like intermediate SQL queries that Power BI is sending down to Databricks, and leave the slots in the Databricks SQL warehouses for actual queries that's returning the results of the visualization you want to see. And so that's on the Power BI side. For Delta side, so this is a storage layer. The first thing is very, very obvious, is to use Delta. I've very often have customers that come and say, oh, we used to use Parquet and we switched to Delta and we saw like 95% of performance increase. And that's just because Delta is optimized for Spark workloads. There's a lot of file layout, a lot of optimization that's built into Delta that Parquet just doesn't have. So if you are running Databricks instances, if you're having Databricks as the backend of Power BI, make sure that your tables, your gold tables, are stored in the Delta format. And you want to set not null as your table, like column definition wherever possible, just because Power BI, once it sees not null, will generate more efficient SQL queries. Use predictive optimization in Databricks if you can. So predictive optimization is only available for managed tables, and does three things. It will optimize your table for you. Optimize meaning like compact your small files into 128 megabytes, so that basically is the optimal size that Apache Spark really likes and performs really well on, and that will be done for you automatically. And the second thing predictive optimize will do is to vacuum the Delta table. So vacuuming meaning, like if you say have a different version of a table written, and you keep writing different versions of tables, or delete some rows or something, there will be a lot of obsolete Parquet files that exists in your table that is not read by Delta, because Delta's got a transaction log that whenever you're reading Delta tables, the transaction log tell the compute which Parquet files to read. And if you have deleted some rows and they sit in a separate Parquet file, these Parquet files are still there. It's just not read by you. But you want to clean up these obsolete Parquet files. And traditionally, people will run vacuum like once a week just to make sure all the old files are gone. But predictive optimization will do that for you automatically. The third thing it will do for you automatically is to run analyze table. So basically, it will incrementally update the statistics about the table. So whenever you are reading the Delta tables, the compute is reading the Delta tables, it will know the statistics, know the maximum, max and means, and knows exactly where to find the files quickly. So these are really like knob-free kind of features. You just need to turn on predictive optimization, and a whole lot of optimization is done for you behind the scenes. You don't have to worry about it. If you don't have managed table though, because a lot of people would prefer to use external table rather than managed table. For people who are not very familiar, the difference between managed table and external table is if you delete a managed table, both the metadata of the table as well as the actual data of the table will be deleted. But if you delete an external table, only the metadata of the table will be deleted. The actual table the actual data, like the Parquet files in your ADLS2 storage, are still there, right? So some people would prefer to have external tables just because they prefer more control. If you have external tables, predictive optimization is not available to you. So what you want to do is to run auto-optimize yourself, to run analyze table yourself. These are all like commands you can put in a notebook, and you can basically do a metadata driven kind of pipeline and cycle through your tables and run these commands once a week or something. Make sure that make sure your tables are optimized if you don't have managed table, if you prefer to use external tables. Use liquid clustering instead of Z-order and partitioning. So before liquid clustering came out, Z-order was the go-to kind of index technique that Databricks would use. And partitioning, we basically ask customers not to partition if the table is under 1 terabyte, and just use Z-order instead. If it's beyond 1 terabyte, then do your own partitioning. With liquid clustering that came out about 18 months ago, basically it replaced all of that. Just do liquid clustering and cluster by your like selective query predicates or your join keys, or you can let liquid clustering kind of auto select the cluster key based on your query patterns. That also works. So that's the latest kind of technique that Databricks uses to co-locate the data and make sure your query runs really fast, and that doesn't have any dependency on Unity Catalog or anything. So you can use liquid clustering if you're not on Unity Catalog as well. And the last bit is to avoid using like wide data types, just because like Databricks will allow you to do very wide, like we chart like crazy amounts data types, but you want to limit that so that the data model that you're bringing into Power BI, the semantic model you're publishing to Power BI, is limited in size. And so that's on the storage front. Basically, the moral story is Databricks had built in a lot of features like liquid clustering, like predictive optimization, to help you manage the file layout, the performance of it, and try to leverage these if you can. And if you prefer to have your own control, then do the traditional auto-optimize or analyze table yourself. That's also viable. In terms of the Databricks SQL, again, this is becoming more and more managed. So there's not many knobs to turn, just a few things to be aware. First is to use Databricks SQL warehouse rather than an all-purpose compute. A lot of times, different customers will come to me and say, oh, it's not performing very well. Power BI on Databricks doesn't work. That's because they are connecting to a all-purpose compute. And all-purpose compute, by all means, is built for data engineering workloads, for notebook interactions, not for SQL workloads. So if you want SQL workloads to work really well, you want to use Databricks SQL Warehouse instead. And typically, we advise customers to use separate SQL warehouses for different purposes. For instance, if you have like a import data set that is refreshing, and you have other data sets is on DirectQuery, potentially you want to separate SQL warehouses and do the setup for the SQL warehouses for your DirectQuery workloads or your import workloads. Another reason you want to separate the SQL warehouses is for potentially cross-charging or chargeback purposes. So you could have like different SQL warehouses tagged with different BUs or different cost centers, and then you can do the chargeback quite easily, because all of these costs of SQL warehouses or the different type of computes are logged in Databricks system tables, and you can query the system tables and just find out certain warehouses, like how much did it cost, how long did it run, and so on and so forth. The next thing is you want to choose the SQL warehouse size properly. And if you have more complex queries, if you have bigger data sets, you want to potentially scale up and use a larger t-shirt size if you're using serverless, and scale out, like putting more clusters for auto scaling if you have more users or more queries coming in. The next thing is basically Databricks SQL gives you 3 different flavors. One is classic, one is pro, and the other serverless. Use serverless whenever possible. The only potential like use case you potentially want to use classic or pro is if you have a streaming workload and Power BI is querying that streaming workload at all times, then there's no need to use serverless because it won't save you any money. It's better to use like a classic or pro cluster that's running all the time. But if your SQL is kind of on and off, depending on the direct query pattern and depending on the import when the semantic model gets refreshed, then it's better to use serverless instead. And this is because serverless gives you quite a lot of like performance optimization out of the box. One is predictive I/O that basically uses machine learning to analyze your query patterns and try to speed up the performance using the learning from the machine learning. And then intelligent workflow management, it's a mouthful, basically is Databricks SQL serverless flavor comes with actually a fast lane and a slow lane. So if you have something like, say, I was running a query in Power BI that's got stuck, right? Like it's very complicated. It's translating a very complex DAX query into SQL, and the query is taking forever. And basically that will be in the normal lane, and someone else is also querying Databricks, and then basically their Power BI report will not necessarily be stuck because my query is stuck. They will go through the fast lane. All of the short, quickly resolved queries will go through the fast lane and bypass anything that's stuck. And that's really good if you have like, complex DAX queries that could potentially occupy a lot of traffic between SQL Warehouse and Power BI. You can use the fast lane to kind of bypass a lot of that and make sure, if your CEO is running something that's really quick, they still get the results and not be influenced or impacted by someone that's running a slow running query. And then serverless also offers resource set caching within the serverless environment. So you can, if someone else has run the same query, it will return the results quickly. The last thing is you can use the query history within Databricks SQL UI, but also query history is all logged as part of the system tables in Databricks. The reason you want to take a look at query history is, one, you can take a look at the long-running queries. So you want to make sure that, any long-running queries, maybe if there's any optimization you can do, by writing the DAX better or anything like that, you will address that. Another thing is you can potentially do liquid cluster by if you see a lot of queries in the query history is filtering by the same column, then you can liquid cluster by that column. If you're not doing auto cluster by, then your performance will be better. Just understand that query history, understand your company's query patterns will help a lot in terms of like performance tuning, both on Power BI as well as the Delta side of things. I think that's performance. Any questions before we move on to the...
We have a few, but
Yeah.
you explained that brilliantly for me because I've never used Databricks, so it made perfect sense, and so it was a joy to listen to you, Liping.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, question from Jake. Since you can't use service principal for OAuth connections to Databricks, does it make sense to use user principal names?
We'll come to the security piece. I'll park that question and we'll address that in the
I'll keep an eye on it so you don't have to remember. Marta asked about predictive optimization for external tables, but you covered that, so thank you. Anthony asked, is Z order similar to V order in Fabric?
So no, so Z order came in like years before V order came in. I used to wear a Microsoft hat, so I won't say this. This is recorded, but the name is maybe not that original. The V order name. That said, so Liquid Cluster actually uses the same kind of underlying logic as V order.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Another quick one about, I've got another three, but I think they're fairly okay-ish. DirectQuery, if you've got a large semantic table and also hundreds of users, would that impact the gateway when using DirectQuery? And that was from Rodell.
We got the gateway also later in the
gateway. Yeah, no, don't worry, we'll park that one.
We also have the gateway part, but in short, I can quickly answer that question. Yes. So if you have hundreds of users, you have DirectQuery. Gateway tend to be the bottleneck. If you've done everything that we said here in terms of performance tune, the storage layer, performance tune, Power BI, performance tune, the DB SQL, and your performance is still not good, gateway tend to be the culprit on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. From Donald, is Databricks SQL Warehouse similar in purpose to Microsoft Fabric Warehouse?
So as I understand, I mean, this is me being completely ignorant because I left Microsoft about 2.5 years ago. As I understand, the Microsoft Fabric warehouse is the traditional kind of dedicated SQL pool, the T-SQL piece, right? Whereas the Databricks SQL warehouse is just the compute. So you have the storage layer that is the Delta, and you just put a compute layer on top. Again, I can be completely wrong about Fabric SQL Warehouse because I haven't touched it
we've got a session on it in a couple of weeks, so we'll learn more as well. A couple from Janessa, and hopefully, or Janessa, sorry if I pronounced it wrong. If they're using views in Databricks instead of tables, are there any best practices? And also, can Databricks compute be mirrored in Fabric? And then we've questions.
So your second question needs to be answered by Microsoft, unfortunately. So like the short answer is Fabric has got its own version of Spark, right? So Fabric uses Spark, I think 3.1, and Databricks is on Spark 3.4. So there's a version difference, but also like I think probably from an ambition perspective, Fabric won't necessarily need to bring in the compute from Databricks, it will just use its own version of Spark to run Fabric workloads. Sorry, what was the first question?
And then the first one was if they're using views in Databricks instead of tables, are there any best practices?
So if you can use materialized views instead of views, just because materialized views are also like pre-calculated and pre-stored, the result will be faster than views. If you have to use views, then it's better to like store the views as a definition in Databricks than writing the view definition as part of like the native query in Power BI, just because you can reuse that logic all the time as well. So, but in terms of performance, it's really better because Delta has built in a lot of performance optimization. So like it's better to store your serving layer as a Delta table than views. You will see Delta table performs faster than views all the time.
Yeah, perfect, brilliant. And Marta says she needs more sessions, or he needs more sessions with you explaining the secrets. You have to check out the website, your website and your content. Liping's becoming a content creator, but yes, I agree. So we already want an encore, Liping. Right, I'll stop now.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn or YouTube. Drop me a message. I'm happy to have a chat as well. Cool. So security piece. So really security, we're talking about two particular pieces. One is the identity and access. So someone was asking service principal versus user principal. We'll answer that in that part. And the other is the networking security piece. Again, the gateway is part of that. So we will structure the security piece in these two kind of parts. So first, for those of you who are familiar with Databricks, Databricks is an advocate for medallion architecture. So your data comes in, it's all raw, it's like, you know, unprocessed. You get store that in a Delta table, and it's a bronze layer. You apply some data quality, some business logic, and it becomes a silver layer. And then you do the aggregation, maybe star schema becomes the gold layer. Once it hits the gold layer, that's just the storage piece. And you need a compute. The compute is Databricks SQL Warehouse. And the Databricks SQL Warehouse will speak to Power BI. So this is a very, very common pattern. The first one is, sorry, I need to move this thing. Anyways, so Databricks will have the SQL Warehouse providing data to Power BI. If your Power BI have any, and I do mean any, import elements, so if you have an imported semantic model, if you have a hybrid table, aggregations, or if you have a composite model, all of these requires what you call a service account. So your user principal, that's the question came from, exactly that, right? So in your AAD, you want to create a user principal that is a service account that doesn't belong to anyone. So it would have been like Power BI refresh at yourcompany.com. And you want to use that to do the refreshes from the SQL Warehouse. And at that point, because you're only using the service account to do the refreshes, the access control mechanism in Databricks, which is called Unity Catalog, that you see here, Unity Catalog will check what this service account has access to. Does this service account have access to this table, this column, this row, and will return to Power BI what this service account has access to. But because it's imported, it only is speaking to Databricks using a service account. It doesn't do access control properly in Databricks. So what you ended up having to do is to set up role set level security in Power BI to say, Sue has access to UK, I have access to Singapore, and that can be set up as role level security within Power BI itself. The second pattern, sorry, I think I am on the thing. Okay, the second pattern is basically the same thing, except the Power BI semantic model is on DirectQuery. Now, technically, you can do this. You can have a DirectQuery semantic model on top of Databricks and still use a service account to talk to Databricks. Databricks will return whatever the service account has access to, and then you can use Power BI to do role-level security access control. That's fine. That's a valid pattern as well. But this is probably more common. So the first and the third is what we see all the time is either you're importing data from Databricks to Power BI and use a service account to do the refresh and then get Power BI to do the access control, or you can do something called AAD pass-through. So the semantic model has to be on the DirectQuery mode. And then there's a toggle to say, let report users use their own identity to speak to the underlying data source in Power BI. So you can toggle that on. When you do that on the DirectQuery data set, what happens is Power BI will send down the AAD identity of the end user, and Unity Catalog will check whether that end user have access to this table, this view, or this column, or this row, and then return the results. In this third pattern, you don't need Unity Catalog and role level security in Power BI. You just need Unity Catalog. Everything is stored as a single version of truth in Unity Catalog for access control. The problem with that is probably majority of the organizations won't just have DirectQuery data sets. They will have, like import data set and DirectQuery data set. So typically what we see is pattern number 1 mixed with pattern number 3, depending on how big your data set is and how desperate do you need Unity Catalog to do the access control rather than setting up a separate one in Power BI and so on and so forth. The last bit is if you're a Power BI developer and you're using desktop to build the semantic model, and what happens is Power BI desktop will send down your AAD identity to the SQL warehouse, and the SQL warehouse will check with Unity Catalog what data you have access to and return the data accordingly. So when you are developing, make sure you have a proper kind of access to the data. And then when you do publish to the Power BI service, then set up all of these previous patterns accordingly. The next bit is networking security. So one thing is really important. Not everybody will need a gateway. The only 2 scenarios you will need a gateway is if you have something called front-end private link or IP access list. These 2 basically controls the access to everything Databricks control plane. So Databricks control plane has things like the workspace UI, the ODBC, JDBC connections, the REST API endpoints, all of these. If you want to access any of these and you want to block people from, unauthorized network, you can set up front-end private link or IP access lists. The difference between the 2 is front-end private link says the traffic between your end user, your end user anyways need to be in a private network, and the traffic between that private network and Databricks travels through Azure backbone. Whereas the IP access list says your end user need to be within this range of IP, and that can be a private network range. But the traffic between your end user and Databricks will travel through public internet. So front-end private link is more secure. And what you want to do is, if you have these two set up, you want a gateway. There's no way around it. You have to have a gateway. The difference is you can choose between a VNet gateway, which is basically a gateway that's provided by Microsoft, fully managed, but the hardware of the gateway cannot be scaled. So it will give you auto scaling within the gateway, but within the limit of that hardware. You can't scale up the hardware or scale. That is potentially a challenge if you have a lot of queries, a lot of users going through the gateway. On-prem gateway is different. On-prem gateway is hosted on a VM. You have to provision the VM. You have to patch the VM, but you can do the scaling yourself. You can control the size of the VM. You can do load balancing. It's a lot more controllable, and it's a lot more configurable. I guess that's the choice between managed versus control. You have to make a choice between the two. So typically, I advise customers to start with VNet gateways, see the performance. If that's good enough for your auto scaling, your needs to do all the direct query performance and everything, then use VNet gateway. Wherever VNet gateway becomes a bottleneck for performance, then move on to on-prem gateway, because you can configure it and to do a lot more scaling and kind of performance tuning with on-prem gateway than the VNet gateway. So start with VNet gateway. If it's not enough, then graduate to on-prem gateway is typically my advice for people. And if your InfoSec people or CISO people don't need front-end private link or IP access lists, then potentially you don't need to set it up. Then there's no gateway needs. Only set it up because you need it. Don't just treat all these security features as a shopping list. A lot of companies do, just because it's available, we'll turn it on, and then gateway becomes a headache for them. Okay, so that's the security piece. Any questions on that before we move on to the next piece?
Just a quick one, but it's been asked a couple of questions in the chat as well, was between the 4 approaches that you signposted about connecting to BI and Databricks, what's the best option if you've got large volumes? And Marwen's asked, high or low frequency, high or low latency? I guess it depends, doesn't it, really, on the data that you're pulling in and what you're doing.
Yeah, so if your volume of data is really high, then the third pattern is more valid, because then you don't have to set up access control on Power BI front, and everything will sit in Databricks. Now the question, it becomes slightly complicated when you have high volume of data, a large volume of data, and then also a lot of users, because then, yes, Databricks SQL can handle it, but it could be very expensive if you're scaling out all the time. So I think if that's the kind of case you're working with, I will go with pattern 1, but something like hybrid tables or composite models. So you have some elements that's like cached in Power BI. So that's like meeting the latency requirement. But for the like scaling out capabilities, you can still utilize Databricks SQL. So yeah, I like if you have that kind of requirement where like hundreds, thousands of users is using a model that's like, 50 gigs, I would definitely consider composite model hybrid tables.
Okay, brilliant. Quick one. What's the difference between VNet Gateway and Cloud Connection?
What's cloud connection? Sorry.
I think we have a cloud connection in BI. So yeah, not quite sure really. I think that's in BI, Janessa. And then another quick one, if I need to share to an external user, then which method to use in security access control when SM has large volume?
You can do both. So basically, Unity Catalog is synced with AAD. If you're sharing with an external user, that external user will be set up as a basically external user in your AAD. So you can do row-level security in Power BI, or you can also like basically that's you have to choose to sync these external users into Unity Catalog. Basically, everybody's AAD groups are a mess, and Unity Catalog has the ability to sync from AAD, but you have to select the groups and the users you want to sync over. So say if you have a group of people that are external users, what you potentially could do is to set up a group in AAD for these external users and then sync that group over to Unity Catalog, and then you can do pattern 3. Alternatively, you can do pattern 1 and just give access to these people in Power BI. But from a mechanism perspective, both Unity Catalog and Power BI don't discriminate just because it's an external user, because both of them rely on AAD to think whether this is a user or not. Yeah.
Okay. We got a couple more, but I'm going to let you carry on because I want to let you get to the questions, but get to the end. But I've captured them for you.
Cool. Yeah. Okay, so integration. Now, integration, you want 3 things. You want to have a seamless integration. Typically means you don't have to like switch between UIs all the time. Like, our developing in Databricks, then I have to like go download the PBI DS file, open it in Power BI desktop, and then publish it, then go to Power BI UI. It's a lot of steps, a lot of content switching, a lot of changing of UIs. You want that integration to be less kind of click through different types of UIs, be more seamless. You want that integration to be codified, so that you can do things like CI/CD and to have the whole thing like automated if you can. It's really traditionally kind of CI/CD with Power BI was a little bit of an afterthought for Microsoft, but recently they picked up a lot. Basically, Rui did a lot of work on kind of helping the pro dev tools for Power BI developers to go forward with a lot of these automation and kind of codified Power BI and so on and so forth. So with that in mind, you want to have the end-to-end kind of development flow from Databricks to Power BI being seamless, codified, and automated. And there are a few integrations you can consider. The first is publish to Power BI. So within the Databricks UI, you can click on publish to Power BI workspace on the top right corner for anything that you have in Unity Catalog, either a table or the entire schema. And but I would advise against using this feature One, this feature doesn't have API support, so this is entirely ClickOps. So you click on it, it published to Power BI Workspace. You don't need desktop, but you can't do a lot of like configuration. You can't choose certain tables within a schema. It's either a single table or the entire schema. So it's not that production ready. They need to come out with API support. They need to come out with a lot more user-friendly features for this to be actually be ready to be used in the production environment. But it's an option if you want to play around and without using desktop, you can publish directly from Databricks Workspace to the Power BI Workspace. It does work, this feature. It's just that it doesn't have any kind of API support, which means you can't kind of automate this at all. The second thing got announced today, like Donald said, this was announced at FabCon today. It came out on a blog as well, if you want to read about that blog. Essentially, what this is Databricks has a orchestration feature called Workflows. So you think of this as the compete to like Data Factory, basically. And Databricks workflows typically have like notebook tasks, SQL tasks, Python real tasks, and different kind of tasks you can run. And there's a additional task that's announced today, which is the Power BI task type, and that will help you publish and update and refresh the Power BI data set. So this is the codified bit, because the Databricks workflows has CI/CD supports. It's got the Databricks Asset Bundle supports, so you can actually codify this entire flow up until publishing to Power BI or in a CI/CD pipeline. That would have been possible going forward. Now, bear in mind, it is public preview to start with. Two, it's just got announced. So there's probably a lot of missing elements to it, because when you publish a semantic model, you want, all the measures, all the DAX calculations, everything that traditionally you don't do in Databricks. So just because it's got a task type to help you publish this to Power BI doesn't mean it can do things like calculated columns and measures and so on and so forth. Unity Catalog came out with UC Matrix, which started to do some measures that try to mirror what Power BI semantic model does, but still there's quite a lot of gap in terms of missing features. So when you do this, you still won't be able to do, for instance, calculated columns and so on and so forth. But potentially in the future, this will catch up. The UC Matrix will catch up to what Power BI does in all of the semantic modeling. Then you one day you'll be able to do this end to end, just use Databricks workflows, I'd imagine. But it's public preview today, so try it out if you're interested. And the next flow, and this is not because I started to collaborate with Tabular Editor, this was what I was using when I was at Databricks already, is Tabular Editor is probably right now the only mature solution if you want to publish from Databricks to Power BI. So Tabular Editor can connect to Databricks using an ODBC connector, and then you can do all the modeling pieces, creating partitions, creating all your measures and everything you need to do traditionally with Tabular Editor, and then deploy it to Power BI. Compared to the previous two methods, this is still the most mature, most production ready kind of solution that you could use. And this because Tabular Editor comes with CLI as well, and Databricks has got Databricks asset bundles. So between asset bundles and Tabular Editor CLI, you can actually automate the entire process and make a CI/CD pipeline that's built Databricks pipelines and then publish to a Power BI semantic model, or within that Azure DevOps pipeline or GitHub actions kind of thing. So yeah. So that's the entirety of the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. Yeah.
Brilliant. That was outstanding. I absolutely loved it. Really, really loved it. You hugely technical, but I understood everything. I mean, I've got a good knowledge anyway, but it was just explained in a really clear, concise, flowing, relatable way. So I really enjoyed that, Liping, really enjoyed that. So questions. Tabular Editor, can we use 2 or 3? We love Tabular Editor in this user group. We've had Daniel on, David on, Morton on. So, we're huge fans of Tabular Editor. Prathamash, this will be in YouTube. I'll be presenting in YouTube. So Tabular Editor 2 or 3?
It depends on what you are
for the
doing.
integration.
Yeah.
Do you reckon with the Databricks?
I think it depends on what you are doing. I think for the enterprise license, I think if you need to XML endpoint, you will need the Tabular Editor 3 license to do it.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Other questions? Janessa was asking about the VNet and the cloud connection, and that's when you're in Power BI service. So I'm presuming, Janessa, that what you've done is you've published your model. It's connecting to Databricks, and what you want to do is to publish it and set up refresh, and it's asking you whether it should be a gateway or a cloud connection.
It should be gateway. So anything that's, if your Databricks is locked behind the private endpoint or private link, then basically the private link says, unless you're in my private network, you can't talk to me, right? But Power BI is a SaaS solution. It cannot be in your private network. So the only solution to refresh your data set is for Power BI to speak to a gateway. The gateway is peered to your network, and then it can refresh your data set. Now, if your Databricks is not in a private link environment or the IP access list environment, then you can just use the cloud source. It should be fine. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. Another one from Rodell. Does the expiry of token or password authentication with connection to Databricks are configurable to a longer period to avoid keeping this updated more often if it expires too frequently?
Do you mean the AAD token or the the timeout for the refreshes?
I think the AAD token, but I suspect
so the AAD token.
If I've got it wrong, pop it in the chat.
Yeah.
AAD token.
Yeah. So the AAD token expires within an hour. And that means if your data set refreshes takes longer than an hour, then it will error out. It's a known issue. Databricks has been working on that. It should come out with a fix soon.
Okay.
Again, I can't speak for the company anymore, but I know for a fact they've been working on this for a few months now, so it should come out with a fix soon. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And Fernando said, when you were talking about integration, mirroring in Fabric, can you use mirroring to pull the data out of Databricks?
I think you can. The question I will ask is, what's the benefit of that, right? So you want to think about potentially kind of use Databricks to push the data to Power BI, or do the mirroring and then do it through the Fabric and potentially Direct Lake and all that. So like, I think there's a trade-off between performance and operational complexity, because when you do like mirroring and the Fabric direct query piece, you want to think about how to set up CI/CD and management overhead of that as well, because there's no longer two components, potentially three components in that pipeline. So yes, you can mirror the data up, but is it worthwhile for your performance gain? Is there, like I said, liquid clustering and vOrder is basically the same. Not the same, sorry. I take that back. If it's recorded, it's not the same. It's used similar technologies. So again, think about the performance gain versus the operational kind of overhead you might introduce by having the mirroring into in your pipeline as well. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. He's put a counter question to his question with a horrified face in the chat. And one last question: can we use Tyndall instead of Tabular Editor?
I don't know if Tyndall will just connect to Databricks automatically, because I know for a fact that Tabular Editor had to build a connector for Databricks. So that I will probably need to double check. I'm not aware that can just replace what Tabular Editor does.
Yeah, I wouldn't. With my limited knowledge, that wouldn't make sense to me. And Marat's asked, and again, can you run semantic link labs in a Databricks notebook?
That's a Fabric thing, unfortunately.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
I haven't tried though. Like technically you can try, but I'd imagine like semantic link labs has a lot of Fabric specific things building.
It's all iterating over the workspaces, isn't it? So I mean, but what you could do is you could use what Michael's built, because it's all open source, and learn from it, and then see if you can apply that to the Databricks environment. But I would, like you say, I would imagine there'll have to be some custom code to deal with the workspaces in data. I've never used Databricks, so I don't know. But
I don't know. So far, I've only seen people using semantic link labs in Fabric.
Yeah,
it's a good question though. Like I probably go try it. Tell you afterwards.
Yeah, have a go and see if you can use what Michael's written and hack it to apply. So and is that a question you want to answer? Anthony said, what's the reason for the company to move from their established setup to Fabric, and what are going to be the benefits of moving? I think that's something they were chatting about in the chat, about moving to Fabric and everything. That was absolutely awesome. There has been a huge amount of appreciation and thanks and gratitude. I think I've answered. Oh, what question is my shawl? It's orange, Fernando. Let me stop. I'll stop recording.
Cool.
Stop recording. Yes, it's orange.